Hello and welcome to day 4 of the Incandescent Joy Challenge. And so today we are going to talk about reparenting. Now, reparenting is not a word that's as popular in pop psychology as, say, glimmers is. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction on what reparenting means. And so, reparenting basically means that now that we are adults, we are responsible for ourselves. We are responsible for knowing what our needs are, getting our needs met. We are responsible for our own emotions. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, when they concentrate only on that first part, responsibility, they might be thinking, well, I am an adult, I'm responsible. I go to a job and I earn my own income and I pay my bills on time. And I'm a careful driver and I run my own house and my house is relatively well kept and I know how to cook meals. And all of that, yes, is part of that external facade of being an adult. But really, the emphasis is on the second part as much as on the first part. We're taking responsibility for knowing our needs, both physical as well as emotional. And especially, I want to focus on emotional because we're talking about mindfulness, because we're talking about joy, but more importantly, because that is the aspect of being an adult that we don't really focus on in society, right? Nobody does an emotional fitness check to see if you're ready to be an adult. You're 18 and you can in India, at least you're 18 and you can get your driver's license, or 16 in whatever countries. In India, you're a woman of 18 and you can get married. You're a man of 21 and you're legally able to get married. You're 18 and you can vote, right? So we have these age criterias and for maturity, but no one really looks at our internal emotional maturity. There isn't a check, right? So that's something that we are going to focus on today. The other thing that I want to say is that when I say the word reparenting and explain what it means, there are some people who get a little upset about it because they think that, well, okay, I had wonderful parents and I don't want to replace them, right? I had a wonderful experience as a child. I had loving parents. They gave me a home and food and allowed me to pursue my dreams and all of that. And so I don't need another parent. But the thing is, once we become an adult, obviously it's no longer our parents' responsibility. They will always be our parents. We will always expect love from them and approval from them, even in some ways. We will always feel warmed by their approval, let me put it that way. If you're in a healthy relationship, the approval of your parents, the validation of your parents is always going to be very important. But the cycle of life is such that whatever your relationship with your parents, you will notice that now as you become an adult, you take on more responsibility for caring for them as well as your own children if you have any. That's just the cycle of life, right? Then they used to when you were small. So when you become an adult, you do become responsible for your own emotions. If you had a loving relationship with your parents as a child, is a great foundation, a great place to start with, because then you know what it feels like to be loved. And even if you know what it feels like to be loved, even if you know the ways in which your parents took care of you, very often no one explicitly makes it clear that now taking care of yourself in this way is your own job, right? So if you had a traumatic childhood, if you had parents who were very well meaning but they were not really focused on emotions, as a lot of us had growing up, right? When if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, emotional awareness was not a mainstream topic. It was not a mainstream parenting topic. There were certain disciplining methods like timeouts and punishments. In India, very often physical punishment like slapping or hitting the child was very normal. It was very common. And so children grew up knowing that they were loved and they were well taken care of for the most part, but they were not emotionally taken care of, or their emotions had no place to be expressed, right? Or you could say something like, I'm scared about this, and your parents would dismiss it saying, that's nothing to be scared about. So that's the second category of parents. And I think a lot of us would fall into this kind of group where we knew our parents loved us, but we also knew that going to them with our emotions was not really an option. We had to fend for ourselves as kids. And so a lot of us have very childish coping mechanisms with emotion that we have carried into our adult life. And of course, if you had a traumatic childhood and you had experiences in your childhood where you were emotionally neglected or physically abused to a greater extent than the sort of normalized, I don't really want to make a distinction because I see that it's unfair, right? You may have only been slapped, but it may have been much more traumatic for you. There's no scale of trauma really. It's the internal experience of trauma which impacts each of us, and so there's no really scale of it. But what I mean to say is that some of us knew that we were loved and didn't feel loved by our parents. And this was me, so that's why I'm going to focus on it. I knew my parents loved me. They did every single thing that they could do to take care of me, health wise, education wise. They encouraged me and all of that, but I didn't feel loved. And as a child, I distinctly remember thinking, I know my parents love me, but I don't feel loved by them. And so I didn't know what it felt like to be loved and wanted and cherished, even though they did all of the things. So, this is not to blame my parents. I was a very sensitive child, but it is also not to blame sensitivity. It's just that there is sometimes a mismatch between what people can give, especially parents, because it depends on what they received and what their experiences were and what the culture was in their time, and what a human being actually needs. And what a human being actually needs is for their emotions to be expressed, for their emotions to be processed, and for their emotions to be then transmuted, that energy of emotions that we've spoken about on day 2 and 3, to then be transmuted into action, which is in accordance with our values and helps out to live our purpose in life. This doesn't mean that it's perfect, right? We're not all always going to uh, be kind of emotionally mature all the time, and be calm all the time, and like never have a tantrum or a meltdown, never cry. No, like I said, it's about being. Yesterday I spoke about polyvagal theory, and it's about being emotionally facile. Just as you should be able to move from the nervous system state of ventral vagal connectivity to fight or flight when you need it, right? When you need to stand up for yourself, or you need to stand up for something which is unfair, or you need to escape from a actually dangerous situation, whether that's actual physical danger, or it is dangerous situation in the sense that it is bad for you, so you kind of need to leave a job or leave an abusive relationship. So that is where fight or flight are important nervous system states. You can't always be in a connected state to someone who's abusive or an environment which is toxic, but you should be able to then come back down into that level. And by should I don't mean that this is uh, if you're not able to do it, it is some kind of fault or flaw. What I'm sharing are the tools that help us to become facile in this way with our nervous system. So today we're talking about emotional facileness, which is we're able to experience sadness and maybe even cry about it, and maybe we're rant or rave, or go woe is me and poor me and all of that. But then once we are expressed ourselves, we're able to kind of use the energy of that sadness and emotion to do something which helps us to change our life in a way and in a direction which is more suitable to us. This is the work of reparenting. Okay, this is the work of reparenting, and we will all always be works in progress depending on where we start from, what kind of background we have. So to the people who had those loving healthy relationships with their parents, where they felt loved, they felt wanted, they felt cherished, what I have to say to you is that you have an excellent foundation then for reparenting yourself as an adult, right? You know what it feels like to feel loved, warmed, and cherished. And for you, you can start by thinking about what is it that your parents did, because no one explicitly told you you're going to have to do those things for yourself as an adult, right? So what is it that your parents did for you then that made you feel loved and warmed and cherished? Were there certain rituals that they had? Like, were there bedtime stories that they told you? Was it the voice, the timbre of their voice? Was it the way their face lit up? And I'm going to talk about this face lighting up because it's something that I've had experience with. So we have these three categories of people who've had really bad relationships with their parents, who have had a toxic childhood, really, a very traumatic childhood, people who've had a really healthy, loving, warm relationship with their parents, and those who know their parents love them but did not feel loved. Okay. And all of us as adults need to learn the skills of reparenting, because now it is our time to take care of ourselves. And this does not mean, when I say that you need to be able to meet your needs, this is learning skills like recognizing your need and then being able to convey it to someone else, that you need that need fulfilled in a particular way. For example, if I'm working and I want a cup of tea, but I'm really busy and I'm caught up with work, okay, I could think, oh, I wish my husband would get me a cup of tea. I wish someone would give me a cup of tea, right? Because I'm so busy, I don't want to leave this work. I'm in flow and all, but I really desperately want this cup of tea. Now, hyper individualistic would be like, I can never ever ask anyone for anything, and it is up to me to go and make my own tea because now I'm an adult and that's the least that I can do for myself. And on the other hand, there would be a person who would be like, well, XYZ, her husband always gets tea, or she lives with her mom. She's so lucky. Her mom is always coming in to check in on her, or, something like that. Well, the mature adult thing would be, if your husband is at home and he's not working and he's free, is to call out to him and say, listen, I could really do with a cup of tea, but I'm busy with my work. Is it okay for you to kind of make me a cup of tea and get me? I'd be so grateful. So this is like a really tiny example, and I know so many women who find it so hard to ever ask anyone for anything, even something as simple as a cup of tea. They'd be like, oh, no, no, I'm working, but you want a cup of tea? I'm making one for myself. Let me make one for you as well, right? So, and it's not going to be like this in every situation, but what I'm saying is that it is up to us, and this was physical needs. So, when it comes to emotional needs, it's even more nuanced, it's even more complex, and it takes effort. Okay, reparenting is truly the real work of adulthood. It's the real work of adulthood, because you could be a well dressed person in a well paying job, earning well, progressing in your career, and you could be miserable inside because you don't have the skills to reparent yourself, because no one's ever told you that you were meant to take care of these things yourself. So, these are just examples. Basically, I think I'm trying to convey a very complex uh, concept with very concrete examples. So there's obviously going to be a lot more nuance to it than what I'm saying. But simply said, an adult is knowing that you have needs, meeting your needs, physical as well as emotional, as best you can yourself, and asking for what you need from others to get those needs met. And it's very difficult because we're not taught these skills. Now, where does joy come into all of this? Okay. So, if you reparenting basically means you are the child and you are the parent. You are the parent of yourself. As an adult, you have child parts, you have parts of you who are, say, reluctant to do things, who are more needy in some senses. And I'm not using needy as a derogatory word, but just that you have certain needs. And it's also up to you to kind of recognize those needs and get them met in the best way that you possibly can, and to a great extent also recognize that other people have needs, and kind of engineer that compromise where, again, compromise is not a dirty word, but engineer a situation where you can meet most of everyone's needs in the best way possible at any given point of time, whatever the family structure or work structure looks like for you. And so it's tremendously skilled, and we have to practice it throughout our lives. So in its simplest form, reparenting means you're the parent and you're the child, right? And so if you're one of those children who felt extremely loved by your parents, that's the kind of relationship you need to have with yourself now as an adult. You need to be able to make yourself feel warmed and cared for and cherished. And this is where the concept of attachment comes in. Now, attachment is a very popular topic in pop psychology. So I know that most of us will know. A lot of us may have done quizzes on our own attachment styles, like are we anxious or are we avoidant? And of course, like secure attachment is like the holy grail, because it helps us to stay, to be more in that ventral vagal connected state if we are securely attached to people that we love. It was the holy grail for me as a mother. When I became a mother, the one thing that I wanted for my child is for her to develop secure attachment. So I read every book. I did so many courses on attachment, parent-child attachment. And what I want to share with you, again, attachment is a very complex topic, is two things. One is, even if you don't have secure attachment with your parents as a child, it is said to influence all of your relationships later, right? Your attachment style will influence the kind of relationships you develop with loved ones, with close friends, and with your own children. But secure attachment can be earned. And one of the ways we earn it is through doing our inner work, especially through therapy, because there you're in a professional relationship with another person, and you can get securely attached with them, and then take that secure attachment which you have earned into, when you begin to see them as a reliable, trustworthy, safe person to express your emotional needs with, you can earn secure attachment and take it into your other relationships. But I find that therapy is not sufficient. You would generally also have to work on your own inner um, work, and recognize that as we grow up, whether securely attached or otherwise, as we grow up, uh, we grow up with something called as conditioning, right? Which is, all the experiences we have shape us. It shapes the way we see the world. And so it's as if we're all walking around with glasses, but we have different filters depending upon the experience that we've had in our life, the experiences that we've had growing up, right? So if you've had generally loving experiences you trusted the adults growing up, you will grow up to be more trusting of people around you. Not necessarily naive, but you would grow up to be more trusting. Whereas if you didn't, you might grow up to be at the extremes, like very naive, believing people and then getting hurt very easily, or being mistrustful of everyone until they've proven over and over and over again that they're trustworthy. So part of reparenting is recognizing that you have those filters and being able to kind of step apart from those filters and recognize, oh, this is a filter, and what among this is kind of worth keeping as a perspective, and what among this should I now be able to set aside and see the world differently, right? So that's part of the work of reparenting. So the first thing I wanted to say about attachment is that you can earn secure attachment, especially through doing inner work. Mindfulness, I find, is one of the best reparenting tools that you can ever have. And the second thing about attachment that I wanted to talk about is a hack, really. A hack. So, Mary Ainsworth, she's like the OG researcher on attachment between mother and child. A lot of her work was done looking at the attachment between mother and child, but really we can extrapolate it to parent or caregiver and child. So don't think it is gendered in any way. She is the one who realized that one of the most significant markers and kind of the foundations of attachment is mutual delight. And mutual delight is where a parent and a child have are delighted in each other. They're delighted with each other. They're delighted with what the other person does. So there's a lot of it's back and forth. It's relational. And now that we've spoken about delight and we are in a challenge called Incandescent Joy, you can probably see the connection that I'm making between delight and joy. So if you are the parent and you are the child and you want to develop secure attachment with yourself, which is that you want to be warm, loving, and tender with yourself, you want to be able to trust yourself. How do you delight in yourself? How do you find joy in yourself? This is the crux of the question that I'm going to ask you today. So I will give an example, a concrete example of mutual delight. When my child just started walking, right? It was at the same time the first wave of COVID. And so I was at home with her all day long. And when my husband came home from work, he would take her to play for some time because obviously he's not had her all day. Plus, it would give me time. At that time, I was really into, like I said, reading parenting books and doing my own inner work. And I wanted time for my meditation and journaling. And so, for about like half an hour, 45 minutes, I would take time off in the bedroom, shut myself in, and do all of these things. And so, when I was done and I would come back into the living room where they were playing, she would say, Mama, and run to me. And I could feel I would feel so happy to see her after like that gap of 45 minutes. I could feel my face light up with joy, with delight, right? And I could see it reflected on her face, in the tone of her voice, in the way that she came towards me. So for me, it was a very mirrored experience, this mutual delight. And so when I started reparenting myself, and especially through mindfulness, I had to start looking at the ways in which I feel lit up similarly about myself. Like, what do I do that makes me feel lit up? What do I do? What are those little traits? What are those little characteristics about myself? What are those little quirks of my personality that make me feel tender towards myself, that make me feel delighted in myself, that give me joy because I am the way I am? And I know this is kind of a radical question, but yes, what are those things about yourself that give you delight? And these can be your interests, it can be your hobbies, it can be your passion. It's a little different from values because say service is a value of mine, right? It feels meaningful to me to do good things for other people. Like I love chauffeuring family members around for chores. It's something I really like doing. When I go back to my parents' place, I love going with them to the bank and sorting out their bank work and sorting out their paperwork. That's the way in which I serve. I'm not that person who can every day, day in and day out, steadily make sure there's a meal on a table. So that's a chore that I have been lucky enough to be able to outsource. But I will do these things for you. You have a problem, I will help you sort it out. You have paperwork that needs to be sorted out. That's something I'm good at. And it fulfills this value of mine of being of service to people, but it doesn't light me up, right? It makes me feel good. It makes me feel useful. It makes me feel meaningful. Doesn't light me up. On the other hand, art, especially experimental art, process art, collaging, messy art, that lights me up. It lights me up from inside. And I think, uh, an adult like me making art like a child, it's a very enduring trait. Like, I don't know if other people would think it's childish or not. And I'm okay with whatever judgments people may have about me. But I personally really like this about myself. It makes me feel warm inside. It makes me feel fuzzy. It lights me up. It makes me feel tender towards myself. How deeply I care for other people, that makes me feel tender for myself. And so, one way we can work on this reparenting and tenderness towards ourselves is through self-compassion practices. I actually have a meditation practice which is about 15 or 20 minutes long, where we focus only on self-compassion, not like the traditional loving kindness practice, which focuses on a beloved being, then yourself, then a family, then strangers, and then people, then a neutral person, and then strangers, and then people whom it's hard to love. Like, there's this whole circle of compassion. And I do have those kind of meditations as well on the channel. But this one is specifically loving yourself at different ages. And I'm going to link that because today's prompt is to do that practice and then to spend maybe 3 minutes, because we've done all our prompts in 3 minutes. So set a 3 minute timer and reflect on what is it that makes you feel tender and loving towards yourself? What is it that makes you feel joyful towards yourself? What is it that you delight in about yourself, right? And this is really important because doing the things that give you joy, and we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, but doing the things that, noticing what gives you joy, doing the things that give you joy, recognizing that you are joyful when you are doing those things, then using that joy as fuel to do other things, and giving yourselves more and more opportunity to do the things that make you feel joyful. It allows you to develop again that circle of delighting in yourself and being delighted by yourself. And so much of what we've been talking about is circular because we're focusing on inner work in this challenge through the lens of joy and through the lens of mindfulness. And so I hope you can see how joy can be, and things that bring you joy and things that make you feel joyful. And all of the work we've done in the last 3 days can be a really strong foundation for reparenting. Because if you can find your way into emotional awareness through joy, if you've not done it in any other way, or if you've done it in other ways, but you've only done it for like big emotions like rage, or you know, disappointment or sadness, you've learned how to make yourself facile with like so-called negative or difficult or hard emotions, but you haven't really given your chance to balance that out by bringing in and more of joy and turning more towards joy, then this is a great opportunity to do so and to see how it can help you be both the child and the parent in your relationship with yourself. And so, having said that, I will see you tomorrow for our last and final day, which is day 5, which is going to be interesting because we're going to talk about joy through movement, and we're also going to talk about more about using joy as a fuel source, as an energy source to do the things that are meaningful and important to us. So I will see you tomorrow, and I hope to hear from you in the comments, in the feedback form. I would really appreciate you subscribing to the channel and liking any of the content that you like, and obviously leaving comments. It's really helpful. So I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.